All right, I think I should have just given you this meeting is being live stream notification. So hopefully you saw that just now. Cool. And we might get started a little bit late. I want to hear from Angelina. Angelina, if you can message in the Zoom chat whether or not the Twitch is up and running, let me know. If it's not running, that's bad. Or if you want to unmute and say anything. Okay, so hello Twitch. Hello to all the auditors now, or if you're joining a little bit or watching this later in the future. Welcome to the first lecture of Figma Decal. We're gonna wait in just another minute or two to make sure everyone is ready. This is our first lecture of the semester. So we will, today might be a little bit of technical stuff, just figuring things out, but hopefully we'll be okay. Are there usually a lot of auditors? I think it depends on like the day. We typically have like a couple people who at least stay with us the whole semester, but there's usually a couple people who will kind of put in and out of being on Twitch. Awesome. Okay, and one more time for any of the TAs who are currently in the Zoom, please do add TA to your name or FD to your name, add your pronouns, and if you can, please turn on your cameras, especially when we do our introductions at the very beginning. But it is 6:10. I'll wait another minute to get started. There's about 38 people in the call, which is good turnout. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start that. Hello, everyone. My name is Ace. I am the lead instructor for the course this semester, and I'll be doing a lot of the lectures. And welcome to Figma Decal. This is our very first lecture. It seems that I have forgotten to change the slide. It is spring 2022. We're gonna go ahead and get started. This is being recorded via Twitch, and so just know that as you enter the and if you're unmuted, please do try to mute. This is being live streamed on Twitch right now. The recording will be saved as well. Okay. So we're going to get started today with a couple of different things. We'll start with the staff introduction. You'll get to meet the whole teaching staff. We'll talk about the course overall. So there's a lot of logistical things that are happening this semester, especially with it being in person. So we're going to talk through all the different platforms and hopefully answer all of your questions. And then we're going to dive straight into content. We'll talk about basic tools, what design is, and then we'll end with a little bit of a wrap up today. And I'm going to do one thing really quickly. Okay, I've made one of the TAs co-host, Jenny, as a heads up. If you want to control anything later on in the lecture, thank you for bearing with us. This is our first day. But all right, we'll get started. Cool. For those of you who are enrolled in the course, so that's everybody on the Zoom, nobody on Twitch, or if you are on the Twitch but you're enrolled, get to the Zoom, it's in Slack in your email and B courses. There's an attendance form for every lecture. This is how we keep track of watching lectures, and we do want everybody to watch them before that week's lab. The lab is always going to be talking about the content from that week's lecture, so it is important that you watch it, make sure that you know everything that you need to know going into this kind of group activity. And again, this only applies to enrolled students, but you can go to this website, yelkey.com/3. If you are watching this later, this is a link that expires in a couple of hours. So if you watch this as a recording tomorrow, if it's Wednesday, we're going to send out the link again in Slack. This is just easier for us to type. So go ahead and go to yelkey.com/3. You'll see a form with a couple of questions about today, ending with a secret word. And if you would also like to follow along, which we highly encourage, you can go to yelkey.com/nor, that's N-O-R. That's going to get you file on Figma that this lecture is hosted on. So the slide deck will be there. You can access the file, duplicate it, and you can use that as like a starting file to play around with some of the demos that we have, or to just practice things while I explain shortcuts to you. You're not required to do this, but we do highly recommend that you have some kind of Figma file open as you go through the course, because it's a lot easier to pick up on things when you get to actually practice them. You can also just view the slides. Whenever we're in person, it can be a little hard to see the screen. So this is a great way to just really quickly see those slides. So give another second or two. I'll stall for a little bit if you want to open up those files. Auditors on Twitch, you're also welcome to open up the slide deck. This is not like a locked link by any means, and you're more than welcome to view it. And as you're doing that, we're going to go ahead and start with our staff introductions. So you get to meet the people that you'll be learning with this spring. And this is our lovely staff. If you've ever interacted with this course, this staff is a lot bigger than our past staffs. And it's really, really exciting to me because a lot of these students, or a lot of these TAs, were students last semester and they're now TAs. So they know all the content, they know how this works, they've been in your position, and they're more than happy to help you learn throughout the semester. To answer the question in the chat, the secret word is revealed at the end of the lecture. But yeah, we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves with our name, pronouns, year, major, and then our favorite thing that we've ever made in Figma. And I'll get started. My name is Ace. I use he, him pronouns. I am a second year, sort of, kind of third year. I'm studying computer science and the design certificate for innovation. And my favorite thing that I've ever made in Figma is an escape room, which I will probably talk about later in the semester. That was hosted entirely in a Figma file. It's a series of puzzles and illustrations and poems and stuff. Next is Allison, who I believe can't make it due to a class. Allison uses she, her pronouns. She is a fourth year. And I don't know what her favorite thing that she's made in Figma is, but this is her second time TAing the course. She has a lovely fish and a cat in her image, and she will be one of our TAs. Next is Angelina.
Hey everyone, I'm Angelina. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a second year studying bioengineering, and this is also my second semester TAing for this class. And my favorite thing that I've made in Figma is probably an ongoing project. I'm currently designing like an isometric interior design room builder in Figma. Yeah.
Annie?
Hi, my name is Annie. I'm a fourth year, also studying bioengineering. I use the she, her pronouns, and my favorite thing that I made in Figma was this, like, I guess, designer sneaker prototype that I did for my final last semester.
Everyone, my name is Cecilia. I use they, she pronouns. I'm a third year studying linguistics and cognitive science. And my favorite thing that I've made in Figma so far, I also made for my final in this class, which is sort of like a prototype of a book. Then it had like redesigned like cover illustrations of my favorite books inside the book pages.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a TA. I use she, her, hers. I'm a first year studying environmental science, and my favorite thing I made in Figma was an animation of a ramen bowl that like spun around in a circle.
Hi, I'm Hannah. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a first year studying either CS or Cog Sci. And my favorite thing that I made with Figma was actually an animated visual activity tracker for my final project. And then I used a pen tool and prototyping for it.
Hi, my name is Jenny, and I use she and her pronouns. This is my first semester TAing, but I'm a third year planning to declare cognitive science major this semester. And my favorite thing I've made in Figma is my final project also, which used illustration tools to rebrand the logo of Boba Ninja, which is like a boba shop near campus.
Hi, my name is Christy. I'm a second year sociology major. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'd say my favorite thing I've designed in Figma is actually my final project from last semester, and it's a workout notes prototype thing. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Lucy. I'm a second year computational chemistry major, and my preferred pronouns are she, her. And my favorite thing that I've made on Figma is probably like something that resembled Google Maps. I thought that was pretty cool.
Hello, I'm Nick. I'm a fourth year studying econ and data science. I use the he, him pronouns. And I think that my favorite thing that I built on Figma was also for my final, which was like, I try to recreate as much of the Pokemon game, like Emerald, Fire Red, that kind of game. And I try to recreate as many of the scenes as I could.
Hey everyone, I'm Sanjana. My pronouns are she, her. I am a second year declared as CogSci, and my favorite thing that I made in Figma would probably be my final project, which was the UI UX design for a mobile app.
Hey guys, I'm Steven. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a third year CS major. My first semester TAing for this class. And my favorite thing that I created in Figma is probably also my final project. I created a custom level for the video game Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. So
Sorry, I forgot to unmute, but hello. This is our lovely staff of TAs. We have a couple more people here on this slide. Annie Wang and Caden Choi have both been TAs in the past for 2 semesters, and this semester they're going to help teach with a couple of the lectures, and Adam Hutz is our faculty advisor who helps us with a lot of logistical work. I'm also getting messages right now that the yell key might not be working. So this is the attendance form. I sent out just the normal link and hopefully that works, but let me know if it doesn't, or message just publicly in the chat so any of the TAs can help troubleshoot. But yes, thank you. We know that was a lot of people. You do not have to know everybody's names and faces, but if you are enrolled in the course, you will be directly on one of these TAs teams for the course of the entire semester. So they'll be working with you in your labs every single week. They'll be there to provide feedback on all of your work, and hopefully you'll really get to know them as we get through the entire year. And for those of you who are auditing, you'll also get to interact with them on Slack, through office hours, and in class as well. So this is a team of people who was like really here. The lights just turned off. If someone wants to check that, that would be great. But sorry about that. This is a team of people who like really genuinely care. Like I got to see all of them throughout the class last semester or in the past, and they're just a lovely group of people. And so they're really here to make sure that you learn. And as a lot of them mentioned, their favorite projects that they've made were their finals. Okay, great, awesome. Were their finals from last semester. And so hopefully you'll get to make something that you really care about as well. So with that done, we'll go ahead and go through the course overview. This is the why, when, what, where, and how of what you'll be learning this semester, kind of talking through the syllabus and all of the course expectations. The first of the 3 main objectives of this class is to become comfortable using Figma to pursue your ideas. And we're really intentional about using the word comfortable over anything like mastery or becoming perfect or becoming like just an all-knowing expert of Figma. The goal for this intro class is just to become comfortable with it. We want you to be able to, I opened live transcript. Thank you for doing that. There should be captions now, but yes, the goal is for you to become comfortable with Figma in a way that you can leverage it for anything that you personally want to do. So whether you want to be a game designer, if you want to be an artist, if you want to be an illustrator, if you want to do product design, if you want to just figure out how to lay out your room in your new apartment, that's the level of Figma that we want you to be comfortable with, whatever matches what your personal interests are and whatever that you want to do. The second is to create a community and improve collaboration. We really want to focus on this piece of designing with other people because that's one of the standout features of Figma as a tool. Figma is really special in that it's really immediately collaborative. You can have 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 50 people on a single file at one time and still work together in real time. A lot of other tools, if you've ever used something like Adobe Illustrator, that's really difficult to pull off. And being able to collaborate with other people is not only a mechanical skill, it's also just a soft skill that you need to have if you're going to be a designer. Designers typically operate in between a lot of other roles. They're working a lot of the time with developers or with people who are doing research. You know, there's a lot of different moving parts. And so being able to collaborate as a designer is really critical. We also want to make sure that you get a chance to interact with other students. So the way that we've structured labs and your TA groups is to get to talk to the same set of students throughout the course of the semester and really feel like you're a team and really feel like you get to know each other's work at a more personal level. The final objective is to develop a sense for design with a critical lens. And what we mean by this is to really be able to understand critique, to be able to both give people feedback that is meaningful and helpful, and also be able to receive feedback on your own work. We recognize that when you're learning something, it is really hard to show it to other people. It is really hard to kind of develop confidence in your work, but we really want to be able to do that. We want you to be able to make something by the end of the semester and say that you're proud of it. say that you are, happy with the progress that you've made, and to be able to, receive feedback from other people about it as well. So gaining that kind of confidence is something that we find really core in learning design. Now, at a glance, this is a 12-week course. We also have spring break in the middle. It is a 2-unit class, and it spans from today, February 1st, all the way to the end of April. The course wraps up before RRR week and before finals week, where your final will be due by then. And again, we pause for spring break. And for the most part, we're going to be referring to each of the weeks by their number, which we recognize is kind of confusing because it's like 2 weeks off from the actual rest of the school. But this is, for all intents and purposes, week 1, and we go all the way up to week 12. Each week has 2 days of class. The first is lecture on Tuesdays, and then you have lab on Thursdays. We'll also have office hours every Monday and Friday. At a glance, we're going to cover kind of 3 main units. The first is the first half of the course, weeks 1 through 6. This is going to cover basic tools in Figma and FigJam, as well as fundamental design theory, and it culminates in your midterm project, which we introduce in a couple of weeks. When you have weeks 1 through 6 completed, you're going to know basically all of the tools of Figma, at least in some capacity. And so for the next 3 weeks, weeks 7 to 9, we're going to cover 3 skills in a little bit more depth, specifically talking about advanced prototyping, illustration and vectors, as well as auto layout. With those 3 weeks completed, we'll introduce the final project where you can take what you've just learned, combine it with everything that you got in the first half of the course, and really build out something that you're personally really excited to do. Weeks 10 through 12 are a lot more chill in terms of content. We want to give you plenty of time to work on your finals and not increase the cognitive load on all of you. We'll cover miscellaneous content like careers, talk about different files that we find really interesting, talk about accessibility and things that we want you to carry with you for your whole design career or your journey. And then the final week is a final presentation for students who choose to present their work, which we hope is as many of you as we can. It's a really lovely time just to what everybody's been working on. Also, to answer the question in the chat, lab is exclusively on Thursdays. We do only have lab on Thursdays to maintain the Tuesday-Thursday pattern. If you have a conflict, please contact us immediately because we do not allow time conflicts for lab. Cool. The 3 main methods of instruction are lecture, homework, and lab. Lecture, again, is every Tuesday, 6 to 7:30 p.m. You're here, you made it. This is the time it's going to be every week. The lectures are always going to cover various Figma mechanics and elements of design theory. So we'll cover both things like how do you use the pen tool? How do you use, the shape tools, but also things like theory in terms of what is accessibility? What is color theory? How do I use type effectively? Every lecture has an attendance form that's due Thursday by your lab. And while we don't require live attendance, you're more than welcome to watch async. We do strongly encourage you attend synchronously, either in person or online through Twitch. Homeworks are also released directly after the lecture every Tuesday on our Figma community page at Figma Decal. There are 2 parts to homeworks most weeks. There's a set of readings and a file. The readings are just a couple of supplementary things that we find really important. They're never going to be, 30-page essays. They're going to be pretty short articles that we find are supplemental to the content with a couple of reading response questions. And the files are where you get to actually practice the skills that we talk about. Like, for example, this week's homework is to make a trading card about yourself. Homework is due the following Tuesday, 1 hour before lecture, and is submitted if you're an enrolled student on B courses. Now, lab is every Thursday, again at 9 a.m., 10 a.m. or 6 p.m. When you enrolled in the course or when you applied to the course, you indicated your availability. And so we've just finished preparing a first pass at lab assignments. We'll send them out right after a lecture. If you have a conflict with the lab that you are assigned to, you need to let me know immediately, and I will change them and try to get everybody situated in one lab. Lab attendance is mandatory, and there are both in-person and remote options that you have been assigned to, again, based on what you've submitted on the application. Again, you must come to these labs. If you ever have a conflict, you just need to let your TA know. But this is important because attending the lab is also, building the skills of the rest of your team. So it's important that you are able to be present for yourself, for your TA, and for the other students that you'll be working with for the course of the semester, especially because some of these labs are things like critique, working on your midterms together and providing feedback. Again, we have office hours each week, 2 times a week, once on Mondays from 3 to 4 p.m. and once on Fridays from 2 to 3 p.m. If you ever have questions and you can't make it to either office hours slot, you can always use Slack. You can always message your TA. You can always message your TA group or your lab group. You can message me. There's plenty of resources and we'll do our best to help you answer any questions, but we will always be at these office hours twice a week. If you're an auditor, you are also more than welcome to attend office hours. We strongly encourage that you do. This is just open Figma office hours, public to anybody every single week. If we have an overwhelming number of people, we'll have to prioritize enrolled students, but for the most part, we don't. Like, please come, we would love to have you. The links to these will always be on Slack and we'll be sending out the schedule shortly. For enrolled students, these are your logistics in terms of platforms. We know that it's a lot of things, but for the most part, if you keep your Slack notifications on, we will link everything to you. B courses is where you're going to be submitting all of your assignments. You can find any of the homeworks and any of the projects there, and you can submit them through there. Figma community is like more abstractly where we host them. We'll always link it on B courses, but if you want to just take a look at it, that's where you can find it, figma.com/@figmadecal. Slack is for all course communications. Again, if you have Slack on, we will always tell you exactly where to look for everything, and we will always link stuff as much as possible. Please keep your notifications on, and please do feel free to treat it like a community. You know, we really want it to be a space where students can talk to each other, where auditors get also a sense of classroom. And also, you know, you get a chance to message any of the TAs or message me if you ever need anything as well. So all communications, whether it's formal questions or like, hey, does anyone want to do design-a-thon together? More than welcome for the Slack. And finally, Twitch is where we're normally going to be streaming. We're streaming into it right now as well. Most weeks will not have a Zoom. We will just be in person and on Twitch, because if I do all of these things, my computer will freak out. So we're just going to be doing in-person lecture and simultaneous streaming on Twitch. That said, every week there is a TA assigned to be watching the Twitch chat and answering any questions that come in. So attending course on Twitch will not necessarily take away from your experience. You just won't be able to physically be in the classroom, which is totally okay if you want to, be safe or you just prefer being online. We will also, again, try to cross-post as much as possible. We have a lot of platforms. Anything that you ever need will be linked on B courses and Slack. And again, we strongly encourage you to be active on Slack. We've always found that it can be a little difficult. We know at the end of the day, this is just a college course, so we don't expect you to dedicate your life to it. But we're more than happy to interact as much as you are interested. If you are an auditor, you basically do not have B courses. You'll use Figma Community, you'll use Slack, you'll use Twitch, and then you can also reference our course site or our mailing list. If you sign up for our mailing list, we will send you a weekly digest of all of the content that you need. So that's the lecture link, the homework link, the lab link. Some of you students who are enrolled might also be on that mailing list because at some point you filled out the sign up for it. If you want to unsubscribe, that's okay. You can stay on it if you want. As a heads up, that is a mailing list for all students, whether or not they're enrolled or if they're just auditing. Either is totally okay. All right, any questions about any of the course logistics before we move on? Okay, it's looking like Yelki might be down. I'm going to take 1 minute just to send those links really quickly. But should be okay other than that. But yeah, please feel free to send any logistical questions in the chat right now. Okay, looks like we are okay to continue. I'm going to get one of the TAs to send the slide deck link into the chat in a little bit. Sorry about the Yelki issue. I don't really know why Yelki has been down lately, but we'll get it figured out by next week. So with that said, we are going to move straight into actually how to use and how to navigate Figma. So if this is a time where if you want to have a file open, that is a good time to do so. So getting started with navigation, there are 2 main words when it comes to just how to move around the file. The first is panning. So that's moving, left, right, up, down across your canvas. The easiest way to do so are if you have a Mac or just a good trackpad, you can use the 2-finger trackpad panning. Or if you use a mouse, you can use hold space and click and drag. That's what I personally do. Or you can use the hand tool, which is in the toolbar. It is a hand icon, or you can press H and then click and drag. The second half of navigation is just zooming, magnifying the canvas, kind of moving in and out as if you're at a bird's eye view, getting closer and further away from everything. So to zoom in and out, you can use the trackpad, you can use Control or Command, you can hold Z, you can press plus or minus. There's a whole lot of different things that you can do. Depends on what you personally like to do, but you'll be playing around with all of these different things in the lab this week. And again, that's trackpad, Control Command, and use the mouse scroll wheel, holding Z, and then dragging out a rectangle or pressing plus and minus. And Aaron has just sent the lecture file if you want to take a look at it. Now, next is the workspace. So actually breaking down what all these different panels are, what all these different, layouts are when you look at the screen. So whenever you work in Figma, you can break down the workspace into 4 primary parts. You've got the left sidebar, the right sidebar, the toolbar up at the top, and the canvas, which is your actual content in the middle. The canvas is, again, that whole open space that you have to view and work. That's where your actual design lives. You can move around that. That's what the navigation is for. And if you ever want to just buy a little bit more real estate, have a little bit more space to view things, you can turn off all the other parts of the UI by pressing Control and Command and then slash. That's going to let you just have the whole space to work. The tools still work, the shortcuts still work, but it buys you a lot more real estate. The left sidebar is for layers and asset panels. So layers are basically a single element or a single group of elements within a file. This can be a frame, which is represented by the hashtag symbol, a group, an object, any kind of components, text, shapes. All of those are considered a layer. It's one object that is on the canvas. You can rename layers by right-clicking them or by doing Control-Command-R like you might do in other software. You'll also see up at the top that there's a section called Pages. One of the nice things about Figma is that you can have multiple pages within a single file, basically multiple workspaces within one file. So say you were working on an app, you wanted to have one of the set of the screens on one page, you could have another page that has, say, all of the marketing material that you would use for the app. It's still related content, but it can be there in the same file, so you can access it through the same link. It's always in the same place. The second part of the left sidebar is the assets panel, which is used for managing components, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the course. So you don't need to worry too much about it, but it's about this idea of reusability and being able to access things that you've made in the past really quickly. This is especially important for things like UI work. The right sidebar is the design panel. This gives you all of the information about whatever you have selected. So in this case, you see in this example, I have selected a red rectangle with a black outline. And all of the information here is telling me everything I need to know about this red rectangle, everything that goes into it existing. So I've got the X and Y coordinates, where, on the whole canvas is located. How big is it? Is it turned at an angle? I have the color of it as red. I have the style of the outline as black. That's kind of the border or the stroke. And then if I want to, I can also add effects to it, like a shadow or, a blur. And then I can also export it right here at the bottom. So if I want to save it as a PNG, let's say I just finished a whole illustration, I can select the entire illustration and export it as one PNG, JPEG, whatever it is that you'd like. Now the right sidebar also has 2 additional parts to it, but I also want to point out that these values can sometimes change depending on what you have selected. So for example, in this case, I've got a red rectangle. If I have text selected, it's going to tell me things like the font. Is it bold? Is it italic? If I have a component selected later on in the course, it's going to tell me the traits of that particular component. So this right sidebar is going to be kind of constantly changing as you design, but it's going to give you information for whatever you've got selected. Now again, back to these 2 other panels. The first is the prototype panel. We'll talk about this in a couple of weeks in week 5, but this is the idea of adding interactivity to your designs. The inspect panel is also helpful, especially if you ever code your designs. It tells you all that basic information that we just talked about in the sidebar, but in a really easy to digest way. So it pulls out all of the unnecessary editing tools and just tells you, hey, it's this wide, it's this tall, it's this color, it's this font, everything you need to know, especially if you are coding these designs. But for the most part, you are going to be staying on the design panel of the right sidebar. Now, finally, that toolbar up at the top, if you've used anything like, Google Docs, you might know that there's a toolbar up at the top with things like how to bold and italic and adding text boxes and adding shapes. If you've ever used Google Slides, you are in luck because a lot of things in Figma and a lot of things in a lot of design tools are very similar to Google Slides. Google Slides is kind of just a really pared down version of a lot of other design software. So with the toolbar, it's where all of Figma's tools are located. And one of the nice things about Figma is that there aren't a lot of tools, which that might sound a little bit counterintuitive. What that means is that we can teach it in a 12-week course and you know how to use all of the tools. When you use something like Adobe Illustrator, sorry, I keep ragging on Adobe all the time, but when you use something like Adobe Illustrator, one of the things that's scary about it is how many tools there are. This is great because it can be super powerful. There's something made for every possible thing you need. I think they just had like a 3D tool come out, but it's hard to navigate them. It's hard to understand what all of them do. So in Figma, we'll be covering the details of literally all of the tools over the next couple of weeks. And today we're going to talk about the selection tool, which is selected here, shapes, text, and then we mentioned the hand tool earlier. That's the idea of moving or panning around the canvas. Audio is also a special thing that has come out recently. This came out just during the last semester. And so with this feature and a couple of others, Figma is making collaboration even easier to allow you to basically talk to or voice call somebody while you're still in the file. So the idea is, if you're working with your coworker or with your partner on a project and they want you to hop on a call, you don't have to dial their phone number, you don't have to get on Zoom, you don't have to get on the Slack huddle or whatever. You can go ahead and just use Figma Audio, which lets you just join a really quick voice call while you're in the file to make collaboration a little bit easier. There's going to basically be a headphones icon if you are in a particular kind of file. It won't show up if you're in a file by yourself, but it'll show up if you're with anyone else. Now, this is something we'll also talk about in a couple of weeks, but there is a second tool that you might have seen when you were making your account called FigJam. FigJam is just a completely separate product. And what it is a whiteboarding tool. It's a collaboration tool. It's made to be more lightweight. It has, not a ton of features or not a ton of specific tools, but it is really, really powerful. It lets you do a lot of things that you need to do without having to be distracted by like a lot of different options or a lot of different, complex ideas. So you can see here that there's like a bottom toolbar. It functions kind of like how you might expect Procreate or like an iPad app to function, with things like a marker, shapes, sticky notes, stuff that feels like what you would do if you had an actual chalkboard or had an actual whiteboard. So the idea is to make collaboration not only more comfortable, but also like a little bit more fun. There's a lot of like silly little features that it has that make work a little bit less boring. One of those is cursor chat, where you can press / while you're in a Figma or FigJam file. So if you've got a Figma file open, feel free to do that. Press /. I don't know which one's / and which one's /. It's the one with a question mark. But you can start typing and it's going to actually show up for anybody else on the file. And later we're going to send a kind of collaborative file for everyone to join in on, where you can kind of talk to each other. You can also high five people, which we're not demoing today, but we'll try to do it in the future, where if you wave your cursor around really fast on FigJam, it brings out a big hand and you can high five your coworkers. But moving on from FigJam, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth in, I think, week 6, is the selection tool. So the selection tool is kind of, used to select and move layers. It's kind of the default tool that you're usually on when you open the file or you don't have anything else selected. You can use this tool to move stuff, to flip stuff, to select stuff, to drag stuff. So you're going to be on it a lot. And for the most part, this is one of the most core tools to remember. And so with this, while the idea of it might be pretty intuitive, we're going to teach you some of the tips and tricks that might speed up your design process in the future. You can access it by clicking on the cursor icon in the toolbar. It's going to be the most left item on the toolbar before the menu, or by using the shortcut V. Now, one of the ways that you can use layers to your advantage, like I talked about earlier, is by creating groups and selecting multiple layers. So if you have something like you've made this large asset like the smiley face that's made up of one big circle, 2 small eyes, and a curve, I can select all of them. And then I can actually group them. If you've ever used Google Slides, you can do this as well, but you can press Command or Control G, and that is going to treat the entire set of items that I selected as a single object. So now, instead of having to go in and select all 4 of these things every time I want to move the smiley face, I can go ahead and group them and then treat them as one thing. You can select multiple objects in a couple of different ways. The first is if you ever selected multiple like files on your computer, you can hold shift. So if I press shift and select, the eye, the mouth, and the face, it's going to select all those objects one by one, which is what you see going on in this GIF if it loops again. So here I click on the left eye, click on the right eye, click on the smile, click on the face while holding shift. The other thing you can do, which is a lot easier, is just clicking and dragging across the objects, creating what's called a marquee. That's that blue box that appears. So on this side, you can see the GIF right now. I click and I drag, and you see that all of the objects are selected. Also, can y'all see my mouse cursor moving around the screen? Okay, cool, awesome. You can also just go into the layers panel that we talked about earlier on the left side and select multiple layers. Now, when you have groups, sometimes you want to actually just interact with one thing in that whole group. So in this case, I've got this smiley face. I treat it as one object. I treat it as one collection of things, but I just want to get to the mouth of it. I can click in multiple times, just keep clicking. You'll go deeper and deeper into the file or deeper and deeper into the group. But you can also do deep select, which I promise you, this is going to save you at least once. If you hold Control or Command while you're hovering over any of the objects on the frame or canvas, you can automatically select at the lowest level. So this is really useful if, say, I'm designing a newspaper spread and I have all these groups of text. I've grouped all the text so that it's all together. I have all these illustrations, I have all these photos, and I realize that something in one of the illustrations, one of the circles is the wrong color, but it is deeply inside of a frame, which is deeply inside of another group, which is deeply inside of another frame. If I hold Control and hover over that one tiny circle, I'll be able to select it without having to do a lot of guesswork about where it actually is located. Whenever you need to move objects, sometimes you just need to nudge things a little bit. And so you can hold shift to move things perfectly horizontally or perfectly vertically. We're going to see later on that holding shift does a lot of things that just do perfect ratios or just make them feel a little bit like snapped correctly. So by holding shift, you're going to be able to move things right, left, up, down, without it kind of skewing off diagonally. Duplicating layers is also something that's going to come up a lot, especially as you do any kind of like UI UX work or even illustration work. You need to copy stuff a lot of the time. And this is a trick that will save you probably quite often, but by holding Alt or Option while you drag out any kind of object, it'll automatically make a new copy of it. So you can copy paste or you can do Command or Control D, but the best way I think is always to hold Alt and Option and drag something out. Last couple of things here. Measurement guides will pop up all the time. So while you're moving things around, you're probably going to see these red numbers appear and these red lines appear. Anytime you see those, it's because Figma is trying to tell you, hey, these are kind of intersecting in a way that feels really nice. The edge of this is touching the edge of this, or these two things are lined up in this way. It can be a little overwhelming, but for the most part, you can use them to make sure stuff is centered or stuff is, right exactly where you need it to be. You can also, if you ever need to, pull up the exact number of pixels away something is. And even if that feels like a little neurotic or a little bit excessive, when you do things like app design or when you do things like UI UX, spacing can be really, really critical. So making sure that something is exactly 24 pixels away is something that you're probably going to have to do at some point. So by holding Alt, while you have something selected and you're hovering over something else, it'll tell you exactly how many pixels away it is from those two things. Scaling, rotating, and flipping are things that you might also be familiar with if you've ever used Google Slides. To scale, you just grab the corner of an object and you move it around. If you want to make it preserve its proportions, so a circle stays a circle and a square stays a square, you can hold Shift while you're resizing it, or press K to use the scale tool. To rotate an object, you select it and you grab near the corner. When you're really close to the corner of it, you'll see that the cursor becomes this kind of arced arrow. When you see that, you can click and drag. And again, holding Shift is going to make it easier. It rotates it in increments of 15. And finally, one of my favorite things to do when illustrating is to grab an object and to flip it horizontally or vertically. You just press it, press Shift H or Shift V for horizontal or vertical, and it'll flip the object nicely. That was a lot of things. I just told you a lot of different keyboard shortcuts. It is totally okay if you didn't catch all of those. If you didn't catch any of those, that's okay too. But basically, the TLDR of this whole selection tool is that the shortcut is V. try pressing Shift, Command, or Alt when you're doing anything, whether it's moving or dragging or duplicating, and you're probably gonna accidentally rediscover a lot of these tools on your own. We kind of put these all together as a way that you can reference it in the future when you're actually kind of practicing your design work. You can open up these slides and look at them because this is kind of a cheat sheet of some of the best ways to navigate through your file and to actually manipulate the objects that you see. So with that, we are about halfway into class. What we're gonna go ahead and do is take a short break, just about like 3 or so minutes. Feel free to take a breather. We know that we're throwing a lot of content at you, and so feel free to take a mental break, close your eyes if you need. When we come back at 6:52. If you have any questions, now's also a good time to throw them in the chat, and I'll try my best to answer them. Okay, it's been about 3 minutes, so we're gonna go ahead and get started again. And after we do a little bit of these, I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick, or actually I'll go ahead and do a quick demo now to explain some of the stuff that I just talked about. So if you want to take a look at the screen right now, I can open up what's actually this lecture. So we make all of our lectures in Figma. We make all of our slides in Figma. And so I'll kind of talk about these selection tools that I just discussed. So we have here the whole toolbar that we talked about before. You have the selection tool, frames, which I'm about to get into, shapes, which I'm about to get into, pen, which we'll get into in 3 weeks, text, which I'm about to get into, and the hand tool that I mentioned. And so the hand tool, I can click and drag and panel across the whole canvas. If I go back to the selection tool, I can also hold space. So now I'm pressing my space bar and I have the hand pop up again. Click and drag and can move around the canvas again. I can move by scrolling up and down, left and right. And then to zoom, I personally like to do Control or Command and then scroll with my mouse. But if you don't have a mouse or you don't use a mouse, usually dragging across the trackpad is the easiest thing to do, or you can do minus, minus, plus, plus, whatever works there. And then finally, that last one that was kind of weird is holding Z. So when I press Z, you can see that, oh, y'all are in the file. Oh my gosh. Okay, hello. Please don't delete anything. If I hold Z, you see the kind of this magnifying glass appear. I can go ahead and click and drag, and it's gonna change my view to whatever I just dragged on. So if I zoom back out and I want to say, I want to look at this particular part of the screen, I can click and drag. It's gonna bring me right in there. Something else, actually, because there's a bunch of people in the file, I'll go ahead and show you, is when you have a lot of people, you can click on any of their names and it'll show you where they are. So I'm gonna pick on Annie Lee. If I click on Annie Lee, I can see what's on her screen right now. So this is actually just whatever is on view on their screen. If they move around on the file, it should move me too. I don't know if you're listening, but if you are and you move around, I'll follow you. But any kind of zooming, any kind of panning will be reflected when you're viewing. And so this is something that you're probably going to be doing in your TA labs, is just following your TA on the canvas or following each other on the canvas. I'm just gonna click around and maybe somebody will be moving. But this is really helpful when you're doing collaboration and someone is, say, presenting their work, or someone is like, hey, can you help me with this part of the file? You can just click on their name and you'll be brought directly to them. Now, there's other tools that I talked about. The left and the right sidebars we have here. On the left, we see kind of all of, actually, on the left, we have the pages that I talked about. So on this particular page, I have the lecture slides as well as the thumbnail. So this is sorted on a separate page because I don't really want it to distract anything else. So I put it there. And then we have all of these layers. And when you see them, all of these are actually different slides. And within each of them, you see I have a drop down. So if I click on the attendance, I can zoom in here and see that there are 3 pieces of text here. 1, 2, 3. Each of them are kind of independent layers of their own, each their own object. Now, if I look on the right side, I have the design panel, and like I talked about before, text is going to show you different things than, say, a rectangle does. Sorry, I just made a square. I'll reveal how I did that in a second. But having these squares is going to be able to tell me, what is the color of it? I can add a stroke to it. I can make the stroke wider. I can make the color different. And then if I have a piece of text, I can say, change the font of it. I can change it to whatever this is. And this panel is going to change depending on what I have selected. So when it's text, I see this. When it's a square, I see this. When it's a whole frame, I see this. And we'll explain what those are again in a second. But feel free to click around. Again, please don't delete anything on this file. I actually don't know how all of you have access to it. But again, feel free to open up your own files if that works for you as well. So getting into some of those things I just referenced, frames, text, and shapes, these are the keys to your designs in Figma. Again, there's not that many tools, so everything that you see that's made in Figma is for the most part made of these 3 kinds of assets. The first of these, and probably the most complicated to understand, is a frame. You can think of a frame as one exportable area. So one sheet of paper in a Google Doc, that's a frame. One app screen in a document is a frame. One illustration in Adobe Illustrator is equivalent to a frame. So you can think of it as one big container that can have other layers, other objects inside of it. So in this example, all of our slides, those individual slides, are frames because they contain, text, they contain colors, they contain images, they contain shapes. Frames are always indicated by the pound sign or the hashtag icon. You see them in the layers panel. All of the different kinds of layers have different icons associated with them, and the frame is that kind of pound sign. The frame tool shortcuts are A or F, either of those work, and they all have kind of gray names in the top left, like we saw earlier. So this frame slide is named staff intro. I can rename it like I talked about before with Control R, or by right-clicking it and saying rename. So to make frames, what you're mostly going to do is you're going to select the shortcut or the tool, which is A or F, and then you're probably going to be doing one of these 2 the most. On the left, you can just click and drag, so you can just arbitrarily decide how big you want it. Click and drag, make it, and you can also hold shift while you drag if you need to. If you also need to make like any kind of default size, like say you want to design for an iPhone 6 or you want to design for a MacBook, Figma has all of these really neat built-in sizes. So if I press A or press F, I see all these default sizes. So I can have a piece of paper that's letter size. I can just make it right now. If I want to have an Apple Watch 41mm, I can make that now. And so these are all built in, which basically means it cuts out the middleman of searching up how many pixels all of these are, and you can make it immediately. frames can also be nested or kind of contained within each other. This might not make a lot of sense right now, but it comes up a lot with more complex designs like in UI UX, where there's a lot of self-contained moving parts within a larger body. So in this case, I've got these 5 kind of gallery images or paintings, and I put them inside of a larger frame. And you see that they've gone inside, they kind of indented here. So all of these go from being at the same level as this main gallery to being inside of it. And what that means is, like, if I move this larger frame, it's going to move all of them with it. These are contained within another container. And sometimes you have to have containers and containers and containers in a way that makes sense when you structure your particular designs. And so in this case, I can look at, let's say, this one. So what this is here on the left, this kind of semester at a glance graphic, this is actually another frame with an illustration inside of it. So I've made all these boxes, I've added all these lines, I've added all this text, but this is its own individual container. So I could just drag this out and now it's its own thing, but I want to keep it inside of this frame. So if I move the whole frame, it stays with it and moves with it. It's being contained inside of that bigger frame. Any questions about frames? We jump into text and shapes. Cool. I'll move on, but feel free to message in the chat. Now, text is pretty straightforward. It works like any other text box. Again, if you use Google Slides, you're in for a treat. It's always indicated by the T icon. It's always kind of got this like fancy looking serifed T. The shortcut for it is also T. There's 2 T's in text and there's 3 T's in text tool. The properties on the right sidebar give you all the information that you need. These are hopefully going to be pretty similar to anything you've interacted with in the past. Things like font, the size, whether it's bold or italic. Stuff like spacing will also be there. So how far apart the letters are, how wide each of the letters are. And then also these more special kind of options that I find really helpful. This is familiar, it's left or right alignment. But these 2 are also really interesting in that they're really helpful for designing without restriction. And so this is talking about the text box. The one on the left, this kind of 2 arrows, means that it's going to continue to grow the text box left to right as you type. So if you type one sentence, it's going to go from this to here. This means that's going to grow the width of it or the height of it with a controlled width. So if you say, let's say you're designing like a column for newspaper, like I said before, the newspaper has to be exactly 96 pixel wide columns, but I want it to be as long as I want. So kind of like a Google Doc where when you reach the end of the line, it's going to wrap around. This is the option you want to select. It's going to be this wide, but it's going to continue going down as you add more text. And this one is fixed text box. So this is kind of what you see. If you're making a Google slide, you're going to drag out the whole height and the width of it. It's going to be constrained within both of the height and the width that you've set. Something to keep in mind is that Figma doesn't have spell check. This will probably get you at some point. It has definitely gotten us on the slides. There are some other things you can download to make it a little bit easier, but mostly just be sure that you proofread because there isn't built-in spell check. It does, however, have numbered and bulleted lists, which it didn't a year ago. So you are the lucky ones. Figma has introduced these features. You can have numbered lists and bullets. Shapes are also one of the most critical tools in Figma. At the end of the day, most apps are just a bunch of shapes. I can show you, like, you know, if I have like my phone, these messenger notifications, that's just a rectangle with the edges curved. The messenger icon is just a square with the edges curved. For the most part, shapes are going to be the important thing that you need to be working with. The 2 main shape tools are rectangles and ellipses. The shortcuts are R and O, O for oval or O for the shape of the ellipse. And once you have the tool, there's 2 main things you can do. You can click and drag, which is probably the main thing you want to do, like you see in this GIF up here. If you again hold shift, that magic shift button, it's going to make it a perfect square or a perfect circle. It'll constrain the proportions to be what you need them to be. You can also just click once. It's going to make you a 100 by 100 pixel shape by default, which you can then go in the design part of the sidebar and modify. So say you know that your square needs to be 9,000 by 720 pixels wide, which is a ridiculous shape that I just described. If you want to do that, you can just go ahead and type it in here, and then it'll automatically do that for you. So taking a look at the shape tools right now, if I want to make a perfect square, again, R, I've just pressed R on the keyboard. I can hold shift. It's going to make a perfect square. You see, no matter how I drag out my mouse, even if it's just all the way to the right or the left, it's going to stay as a square. And then if I want to say change it to be 120 pixels, it'll change for me as well. And so what you saw there is that it keeps the ratio because this linked icon is on, the constrained proportions icon is on. If I turn it off and I make this 240, it's not going to change the other one. If I turn it back on and make this 120, it's going to keep the proportions for you. So that can be really handy in the future. Say that I want to have a star. I'm also in luck because Figma has a built-in star tool. And this is going to let you play with a lot of different interesting things like smart shapes, which we should talk about in a second as well. But you can go ahead and play around with like making squares and circles, kind of see how they feel. There's a lot of other things that you can find handy, like pressing Alt is going to maintain it in the center, and pressing Shift is going to make it perfect. And then you've got just a whole bunch of things. Pressing space is going to let you actually move it around. If you let go of space, it's going to keep it in place. But if you hold space, it's going to move it around. So lots of different things you can play with there. Now, once you have a shape, you probably don't want it to be this default C4, C4, C4 gray that all shapes are when you first make them. And so what you want to do is add a fill, stroke, effect, any kind of color to it. So shapes have fill, which is basically the fill of the color of the shape. The stroke is the outline, so it's that whole edge along the outside. And then you finally have effects, which we'll learn about a little bit more in depth later, but stuff like drop shadows, stuff like blurs. You can also paste an image to fill a shape. I find this really, really helpful. Like say if you saw that staff intro slide before, what I basically did was I put down a bunch of circles and then I copy pasted images into the circle. So if I have an image already in my clipboard, I copy it from, let's say, Google Photos or the internet. If I select a shape, like so say make a rectangle, I'll actually go ahead and show you by taking a screenshot right now. Here's a screenshot of my Zoom picture. I have it copied in my clipboard, and if I paste, it's going to put it right there in the shape, already cropped or resized to that particular shape that I wanted, even if I made it bigger. I can then adjust this kind of cropping by clicking here, changing it from fill to crop. And then now I can make it a little bit different. I can make it a little bit smaller. I only want to look at my ear now, so I can do that. And you can mess with those images as well. When you're doing design work, you're probably going to have to interact with images at least once, whether it's kind of filler images for an app or you're doing some kind of slide work like we are right now. So having this shortcut is really, really handy. There's one other way to add an image, which is doing Control Command and then Shift K. If that's too much to remember, you can also just go here into this menu and say, I think, okay, turns out I don't remember what it is. You can also go to the quick thing and say Insert Image, Place Image, Control Shift K. It's going to open up, it's opening up my computer documents right now, so I can paste in an image. I'll go ahead and put in this Slack React. It's going to paste it right there for me. You can see it. You can also actually have GIFs as well. Now, smart shapes, I briefly touched on this earlier, and I think the star is the most fun one. Figma basically has shape tools that have these extra features that let you manipulate things like border radius, which is that idea of roundness I talked about when I showed my messenger notification. There's very rarely these harsh corners in any kind of UI. Even if you look at Zoom right now, most of the edges or most of the corners are just a little bit rounded. That's border radius or corner radius. So you can manipulate that in Figma directly by one of the tools. With a star, you can also do things like change the ratio of the star size. You can change the number of points on the star. So I'll show you that really quickly. I'm going to this shape tool to make the star. Let's make it red. I can see this tiny little circle and drag it out. This is going to round the corners of that star. I can see this. It's going to make the ratio different. I can have it be like a friendly, chubby looking star. And then I can change the count of the spokes. I can make it ridiculous. I can make it really just a triangle, whatever I want to do there. And then if I look at an example like a rectangle or a square, it's not going to have all of those things. I can't change it to be like 20-sided, but I can change the corner radius. So this is going to show you that radius, if you see it really small, it says 8. You can also see it changing right here. If I have a square with a large enough corner radius, it's just going to be a circle. And if I have it be really small, it'll be really subtle. But this is something that you're probably going to be interacting with quite a bit. Any questions about any of the tools that we've just talked about? Any shapes, any text, any things like that? Okay, the lights turned off again, but this is a good time to ask any questions. If not, that is totally okay. I can go ahead and move on to the next part. But yeah, I don't know why the lights are turning off. I'm hoping that this doesn't happen in person, but thank you for bearing with us. Thankfully, none of you were in here to see it. So let's actually go ahead and try it. Don't go to this link. This link is not going to work, but I am going to send you this file, which enrolled students you'll be able to access. Try to open this up. What this is just, I see some of you have already gotten on here, just a space to try some of these things out. We can maybe do cursor chat. Let's spend a couple minutes just kind of showing the screen. If you are auditing, unfortunately, you won't be able to open this link, but you're more than welcome to just open up a file, play with things on your own, try to write some text. I don't think we let people send links in the Twitch chat, unfortunately, so that's not gonna work, but do try these things out. The best way to do things is to learn. And so the best way to learn is to do things. And so feel free to ask any questions while you're doing this. And I'll kind of just provide some like passive commentary. One thing to note is that the layers are all going to change as you type them if you have text. So text is going to see, if you see here, it says text. And then when I write, hey, 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 it's going to update live in that thing. I can also rename this. And so I rename it to be text1. This is still going to say, hey, 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 but I can, change it. So if I need something that's like, this is the name field, and I put my name, and I want to copy this into someone else, they can put their name, even on my screen right now. So I'll put Steven's name. And these both say name, which is sometimes going to be useful and important. Now, if I want to make shapes, these are all going to actually also default to what kind of shape they are. So I see rectangle 16, I see rectangle 19. This is a star 13, but somebody has gotten creative with this and pulled kind of the corners out, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. Someone's also gotten creative here with this rectangle, rectangle 17, which is really not a rectangle at all, if you think about it. I see some of you are also discovering the slice tool, which is what happens when you press S, or if you check it out, I think here. The slice tool is specifically just to basically export a screenshot. So let's say I wanted to send somebody an image that's just like this part of the screen. What I can do is press S, I can drag out a slice, and then the slice I can now export. If I export this slice, it's gonna just be this part of the screen. So I can preview it. You see it's just got edge of shapes, it's got all of these different icons in it, and that's what we have there. If you can't access this file right now, it is probably because I sent an email invite earlier today. Please accept the email invite. If you didn't get it, then you happen to have not enrolled when I did this. I'm very sorry, but it will be able to figure it out. If you can't access the file, you're seeing it on my screen right now. It's just a little bit of a playground. Yes, do check your emails. Hello, okay, I see some people doing cursor chat here. Hopefully people can see this as well. In a minute, I'll move on. Feel free to keep playing with this if you want, but I can see cursor chat and hopefully somebody else can see my key smash as well. I don't know if this is a reference. I'm deeply sorry if this is a reference that I'm not getting. But yes, cool. I don't even know what font you found. But yes, hopefully this is engaging and hopefully you've gotten a chance to try out a couple of the tools, but we'll go ahead and move on with the lecture. You can quietly do this in the background. I won't be able to see you, but we do want to go ahead and talk about what is design. So this is a really big question. And I think it took me a lot of Googling to answer this. I spent a lot of time, just for context on my background, I couldn't figure out the difference between art and design. And so I'm trying to break it down as easy as possible for you. But before that, I want to hear what all of you think design is. So when I say the word design, what do you actually think of? Do you think of an object? Do you think of a practice? Do you think of a category? Do you think of a career? Go ahead and type some words in the chat, please. I would love a little bit of audience in engagement here. But think about, what do you personally think of when you hear the word design? And also if you're on the slide deck, don't go ahead and look at the spoilers. So from Jessica in the chat, using elements using elements / principles to create art with function. Art with function. We've got this idea of building concepts, creativity and value creation. We've got aesthetics. Sorry if I'm missing anybody's. Aesthetics. We've got fun, creation again, colors, websites and mobile apps. let's take 2 more in the chat, convey ideas. We've got unique. Oh, we've got representation. It's really interesting. You can take that a lot of different ways. I think I missed one before, making the user's life easier. And let's take 2 more ideas. Graphics for marketing, that is not wrong. Graphics for marketing. One more idea about, what do you think of when you hear design? One more, I know you've got it in you. Shapes, you're right. We just talked about this. This is exactly right. And so, spoiler alert, all of these are correct. Every single one of these is a correct, interpretation of what design is. But when it comes down to it, what a lot of these things have in common, whether they are a concept that goes towards it or kind of, the end process, design is a lot of things. And I like to think of it best as kind of these 4 main ideas. The first is problem solving. Design is about identifying problems, identifying something that doesn't work or something that could work better, and finding a way to make solutions. Let's take a look at this lamp for an example. This is from Miniso. It is a collapsible lamp. And so when you don't need to use it, you can fold it down. It becomes this tiny disc that you can put away. And the idea here is that you only use lamps when it's dark outside. And if you're a college student, if you have a tiny apartment, if you have a tiny desk, as much desk space as you can have can be really, really impactful. So being able to fold up this lamp when you're not using it, stores and store it away somewhere saves you a lot of space. So to kind of identify this major problem of desk space and understood a way to solve it by making the lamp collapsible. Now the second, like someone mentioned, form and aesthetic. So while some people lean in the side of function and some people lean in the side of form, I think it is really, really important that you value both. If you make something that technically works, it solves the problem, but it's really not aesthetically pleasing, people won't want to use it. That's kind of an inherent part of being a human. You like pretty shapes and colors. We're like crows. We like shiny things. We like stuff that looks good. And so there is a lot of value in, say, making graphics for marketing. That's really important. So I love to talk about Chobani because Chobani did this rebrand that kind of kicked off this whole genre of rebrands that I don't think any of them are as good as Chobani, where they turned whatever their original branding was into this really sleek font and these really nice watercolor illustrations. And when you have these 2 things in tandem, you're kind of giving the sense of, hey, it's both healthy and delicious. It's both fun and elegant. So even in just really sparse branding with just a very simple font choice and a very simple set of illustrations, Chobani is able to sell itself and kind of communicate this idea of what it is before you even tasted it. So when you're at the grocery store and you're looking at all the different yogurts, when you see Chobani, it's beautiful, it's healthy, it's delicious, it's got fun colors, it's got fun fonts, and that creative designer behind it, that brand director behind it, knew how to communicate these feelings to the consumer. Now, design is also storytelling. A lot of the things that kind of made it hard for me to differentiate art and designers, because a lot of them, a lot of things are both. And so things like set design, things like costume design, a lot of it is just about storytelling. A lot of the time you can't tell the user, I want you to believe this. I want you to think this. In fact, you should basically never be doing that. And so in order to get what you want to get across, you have to tell a story. You have to create a narrative. You have to put them in, time and space and experience, and know that you don't experience design as like a standalone object. You're going to be experiencing it at the time in your life that you're experiencing it. You're going to be the age that you are. You're going to be in the place that you are. And those things all affect your understanding of something. And so this example is from a food photographer that I really love, who created a series called Manhattan Meltdown. And what it was a series of foods encased in ice that represented different local foods that were being harmed by gentrification in Manhattan. And so this example was, I think, pastrami sandwiches from local Jewish delis, where this food was brought as it was a big part of Jewish communities in New York. And as these kind of different, hip, cool, basically gentrified restaurants come in, they're taking over the space for these communities that have existed for a really long time, effectively kind of freezing their existence in time. And so what he did was encase these foods in ice and design these sets and design these images to kind of provoke, you know, feeling out of you. When you see this, you're like, oh, what the crap? Why is there a sandwich in the ice? That doesn't make any sense. But when you kind of learn about the story, you get to develop emotion and develop kind of empathy, which is what the next thing is about. So design, I don't think design is anything without empathy. If you're designing something and you don't care about who you're designing it with or the community that's going to impact, it does not matter. It does not effectively do what you wanted to do. If you're designing to be self-serving, unless that was the entire goal of it, if you don't address the problems you're trying to address, then you haven't designed it well, which is maybe a little bit harsh, but I really do think that's important to like drill in. So the idea here is working with, rather than necessarily for people, to create something meaningful. So if you're going to design something for a certain population, but you don't talk to them, or you don't learn to be empathetic with them, or you don't do research with them, you're not really working with them anymore, you're working for them. It becomes really transactional. But design is a really, really good opportunity to build relationships, to really understand other people. And so this example is from the Center of Urban Pedagogy, who created basically these brochures and pamphlets, both in English and in Spanish, to hand out in New York in order to help people understand what they can do for incarcerated relatives or what incarcerated people can do for themselves to still have a voice basically in local politics and have an ability to vote. And because incarcerated people are not allowed to vote. So the idea here was passing out pamphlets and understanding, you know, what people in this area actually need, what kind of information is useful. You know, they came to the decision that like pamphlets and brochures were a really good way to disperse information as a physical medium rather than necessarily a digital medium. And so they offer these pamphlets as a way to learn what you can do for incarcerated friends and family to help them still have a voice. Now, the takeaway here, hopefully, is that design is in literally everything. So every object in your room, Zoom right now, Figma right now, the chat that you're looking at, your computer, someone designed all of these things. Everything, every single product, every single kind of experience you've ever had has been designed in some way. You know, if your grandma ever knit you a sweater, she designed that sweater for you. If you've ever cooked a meal for somebody to impress them, you designed that meal for them. Anything that you make a decision about to get to a specific solution, you are designing. And so what I really want to drill in is just understanding you are a designer. This is not a class to make you a designer. Everybody is a designer because everybody's always making decisions and kind of solving problems in ways that feel natural to us because that's just kind of how humans work. You know, this is like the part of class where I hold stuff up and I talk about how well it's designed, which is my favorite thing to do every year. So here's an example. Nalgene water bottles are known for being indestructible, being really handy to take around, and just like being very convenient for a lot of reasons. Like for example, this strap not only holds the cap to the rest of the bottle, which is something that I gripe with about every other kind of water bottle because I will lose it. You can also use it to say, you put a carabiner on it and attach it to your backpack, attach it to your bag, you can hold it by this strap. They've also got like a service where you can print things on it to make it a little bit more appealing. You know, that aesthetic sell of it, that visual appeal is really important. It's got not too long of a shape, which is something that I appreciate. But if you want to talk about maybe one of the pitfalls is that it's very wide bottomed, which means that a lot of backpacks that have side pockets won't be able to fit a Nalgene. So that's my 2-minute critique of a Nalgene water bottle. AirPods and Muji pens, I think, are some of the things that people talk about the most as being well designed. Why is it that every single person who uses Muji pens never goes back to any other pen ever again? Because they're well designed, they feel really good. Muji has their branding on lock, and people are willing to go back and spend money and continue buying them. AirPods, why does everyone have them? Is it the brand name? Yes. Is it the visual appeal of it? Yes. Is there a clout that comes with having it? Yes. But also they just work well. They're designed in a way to fit as many people's ears as possible so that they don't fall out. Granted, they fall out of my ears, but I still use them, maybe for clout, I don't know. But other things that you can think about that may be less obvious are an apple slicer. This is used for one purpose. It has a single job and people buy it because it works really well. Having a good apple slicer means you save time. You never have to worry about cutting your own apples. If you say have a kid and they have sliced apples every day, it saves you a pretty significant amount of time. And the fact that people are willing to buy a whole tool for one thing like crushing garlic or peeling apples is a really testament to how well designed they are. So I talked about this before, but no matter what it is, no matter what kind of discipline of design that you're interested in, this is a springboard for you to learn it. So all of these different things, from architecture to branding to package design to, I had to put Hades in here somehow because I was upset. Okay, I'm glad this is resonating with people. Game design, Hades, one of my favorite pieces of design ever, but also things that you might not expect, like sound design, Foley, service design, thinking about, what is a process someone has to go through to get a service. Type design, every single letter that you see was designed by somebody, not just kind of thrown on there. Information architecture is a little bit less tangible, but really, really critical to basically every product you have. Okay, if everyone likes Hades, we can spend the last half-hour class talking about Hades, but I'm gonna have to move on. But all of these are different kinds of design. And I don't know about you guys, but when I hear design, I think about graphic design, and like that's kind of it. I'm like, movie posters, yes. Newspapers, yes. Book covers, yes. But that's kind of like the extent of my understanding for a long time. But the reality is that every single one of these is a kind of design. And so throughout this class, we're going to talk about a couple of different design methodologies and reference some. One of the main ones being human-centered design, which you might have heard before. This is a pretty common term, HCD. And the idea is creating solutions to challenges oriented around actual human needs. So actually thinking about what the user needs, rather than say like what you personally think is best or what the company thinks is the best or what the market is demanding. It's most important in human-centered design to really focus on actual needs and actually address those things. If you're interested in it, there's a whole decal about it at Cal as well, hosted by Berkeley Innovation. And the classic example everyone likes to use is push and pull doors, where yeah, they get the job done. This door is going to get people to come in and out of your restaurant, but not without a lot of people looking freaking stupid trying to pull the push door and push the pull door. And so this is not centered around human needs. This is just a door that exists. And so a better door has obvious affordances on both sides to tell you exactly how you need to interact with it. So say a door with a handle or a door with a push bar, there's only one thing you can do to open it. The second thing that we want to talk about is kind of multiple things, accessible / universal / inclusive design. We really want to emphasize accessibility, not as an afterthought and not as something that you tack on at the very end. You run your color checker and you run your font checker and you're good to go. We really want to make sure that you think about accessibility as a core part of design. So prioritizing accessibility and usability for everybody, or as many people as you can within your target audience without needing to add special things is really important. So a lot of things tackle accessibility by having like an extra mode that you can add onto it or something else that you have to buy. So you can think about stuff like ramps. When a staircase takes four seconds to go up, but the ramp decides to wind around the whole building 6 times and go in a figure 8, they can claim it's accessible, but it's built in this way that really isn't. You're not allowing people to experience something in the same way. You're forcing them to do something that's much more difficult. And finally, equity-centered community design is something from Creative Reaction Lab that we don't get to reference too much in the course, but I really encourage you to check out. It focuses on equity, history, and healing, as well as power dynamics, and creating this idea of like community through design. Something I talked about earlier is like the idea of designing with, not for, which originates with this equity-centered community design. So over the course of the semester, what we're going to learn in terms of design is both Figma as a tool, so all those beautiful mechanical things that we talked about before, but also again design theory and methods. So building a foundation that you can apply those tools to. Learning how to do all of these shapes and text and all of these things aren't going to be helpful if you aren't able to learn anything about design. So things that we'll talk about next week are like color and type. How do those make us feel emotionally? How can you leverage those things for storytelling? Any questions about any of that? I know I'm going a little bit fast now, but it is the last 3 minutes. Great. I'm going to go ahead and go forward with the wrap up, and then I can go back and answer anything or do any other demos. So announcements and assignments, as well as the secret word is coming up. The Figma desktop app is not required. One of the nice perks about Figma is that you can do everything in browser. You don't have to download anything ever, but also it kind of works better. And so I use the desktop app personally. I find it's a lot easier. There's stuff like font flexibility that you just don't necessarily get with a browser. And if you want to try it out, you can go to figma.com/downloads. I never have an issue with it making my computer run slower. It's a pretty lightweight tool. So I'd encourage you to check it out. Now, our Figma community page, we've mentioned a couple times and we've tried to link them. But if you go to figma.com/@FigmaDecal, you'll find all of the content that our team has ever posted. So for you auditors, I would highly recommend you bookmark this page. This is something that you're going to be able to use throughout the entire semester. Every slide, every homework file, every lab, they're going to live there and you'll be able to access them whenever you want. In fact, the versions from last semester are already up, but we're going to continue updating them. We do a little bit of spring cleaning every year because Figma will not stop coming out with new updates. So we have to keep updating all our content. All right, and this week's content is homework 1 trading cards. So what you get to do is actually design your own trading card based on a couple of restrictions or a couple of constraints. We have some templates here for you. And also we have a gallery of our whole staff, everyone's own personal trading cards, which you can make these a lot simpler or you can make them a lot more complicated, whatever feels good to you. This is your first homework. You already have basically all of the skills to do most of these things. It's basically a combination of text and shapes and colors and not much else. So feel free to go nuts. We'd love to see however creative you get to be, but try to express a little bit of your personality onto these cards. The lab for this week, which we highly recommend you do the homework after doing the lab on Thursday, is a playground. This is basically a bunch of different mini games to help you learn how to navigate the file, do selection, and that kind of thing. Now, the secret word for today, which you've all been waiting for, is welcome. WELCOME, welcome. And again, this is only for enrolled students. Every week we're going to have a secret word. And just really quick, I know we're at 7:30. These are your announcements. Homework is out. Readings are also out on B courses. They both should have just been flipped on live now, so you can check them out there. We're also going to send your lab assignments right now in general. Please view them. If you are a student who is enrolled, I will send you the secret password to view the lab assignments in the Slack channel, but I'll type it here as well. That is the password that I've just sent for the lab assignments. And if you can't view them, let me know later, but that should be the password. I'll send it in the Slack as well. Please also send a welcome in the Slack if you need, or if you want. We really love to see them. I read every single one of them. I get really emotional every time I read them, so please do send them. And then feel free to email or DM the staff with any questions. That is it. Thank you so much. I will stick around a little bit longer to answer any questions, but I will be ending the Twitch stream now. So thank you to all the auditors and thank you to all the students for joining today. I am so excited for the semester. So thank you so much.